Well, this is fun. Hello, my friends. I am your host, Daniel Willcocks, and you're listening to episode number 21 of the Writer's Chair podcast. And it is Thursday, 28th of May, 2026, as I record this. So if you're listening to this on launch, it's going to be yesterday. That's how close we are in this ethereal void over the microphone. In today's show, I'm going to be talking to Dan Soule about his journey from profound dyslexia to a PhD in English, the authors who shaped Dan's taste for high-end pulp, the three-category reality of modern publishing, and two book recommendations. Maybe don't scratch your ear mid-thingy. Hello, my friends. I am your host, Daniel Willcocks, and you are listening to episode number 21 of the Writer's Chair podcast. And it is Thursday, 28th of May, Hello, my friends. I am your host, Daniel Willcocks, and you are listening to episode number 21 of the Writer's Chair podcast. And it is Thursday, 28th of May, 2026, as I record this. In today's show, I'm going to be talking to Dan Soule about his journey from profound dyslexia to a PhD in English, the authors who shaped Dan's taste for high-end pulp, the three-category reality of modern publishing, and two book recommendations that may just surprise you. It's always fun talking to Dan, so stick around for that. But before we get into that, I have a few personal updates to share, as I am wont to do these days. So just a few things on my little list this week. It has been a slower week this week for me. I mentioned last week about the finisher energy that has got me finishing 3 book covers, finishing 2 other books, and I'm very, very close to finishing the 3rd book, which is a non-fiction, which is an update of an old book, which is a thing. So I'll be able to share some news on those soon. But it's a slower week this week because it is the UK half term and I've got my 11-year-old boy with me all week. And one thing I didn't share in last week's, which I'm kind of in a position now to share a little bit better, is last week my dog died and it was very, very, very sad. And in the same week, my son's fish also died. So we are taking it slower. And it's one of those weeks where it strangely feels good this week that there's a lots of, as we all know, you have your main projects and then you have all your little tasks that pop up of, can you just quickly do X? Can you quickly do Y? I quickly need to tweak this thing. And I'm treating this week as a finish the small things week, just to give me a bit of that emotional calm, just to spend a bit of time with the kiddo. I've got some time off work, not a whole lot because reasons, but I've got sort of maybe half this week in afternoons off. So it's just a kind of a reminder for people that, we want to push, we want to write our books fast. Well, some of us want to write our books fast. We want to get our stuff out into the world, but sometimes life kind of sideswipes you and you need to give yourself those troughs as well as the peaks in order to make sure that you are being healthily productive. Because as people who have followed me for a long time know, I fell victim to the sort of toxic productivity movement a few years back, burned myself out hard. And so I am very, very conscious these days of managing my anxiety, managing my energy levels. And also, my boy's not going to be 11 forever. He's not going to stay this young. He's not going to be as interested in his dad. So for me, it's a reminder that this week, just slow it down, spend some time with him. That's what I'm doing immediately after recording this. I've got the afternoon off. I'm going to be going and playing Minecraft and then looking at a house. And then we're doing some more fun stuff in the evening with a friend. So yeah, just a little reminder for you, but it's been a slower week this week and I feel so much better for it. So that's that. A reminder for people, I am currently taking registrations of interest for the Writer's Room, which is going to be my Tuesday evening writing slots. So it's a live sprint session in which anyone can jump onto a call with myself and with other writers from 7 till 8:30 each evening, every Tuesday evening. We'll be doing dedicated writing sprints. So you'll come on, we'll chat for a bit. We'll sit down, we'll do a 20, 30-minute sprint in which we all just sit down and do our work. And it's like, I said this last week, but it's such a nice environment to know that you're not writing alone. The whole point of the Writer's Room came about me spending hours and hours and hours writing by myself and just being like, this is such a solo experience. It can be quite isolating. And so to have a checkpoint in the week where you can jump on, where you can dedicate an hour and a half to your book and just know that every Tuesday, this is the slot. And also I'm there. So I've been publishing for over 10 years. I've got 70 different books and works behind my name, 50 short stories that have been published. Like, I like to think I have something to offer. So, if you want to jump on and you're stuck on a plot point or you can't even think of a name for your character or you just, you're in your head a bit, it's just a perfect session to come. And, I will be there to help. Other writers can kind of lend their knowledge into the hive mind. And yeah, it's just I'm very looking forward to starting those. So at the minute, as I say, I'm taking registrations of interest. So if you head over to my website, which is danielwillcocks.com, which is Willcocks WILLCOCKS .com/the writers room, then you will see the button to sign up for the registration there. I'm looking at starting them in a few weeks' time, sort of around early to mid June. So if you want to jump on and kind of be at the forefront of that, make sure I'm aware of that. I can send you an email. The people on that list are going to get priority access straight into that group. So if it sounds good to you, feel free to jump over to that link. And also just a note that I'm aware that it can sometimes be quite intimidating to go onto a group where you know no one, and you might have to speak, you might not. There is no expectation to talk if you're not comfortable. I very, very specifically am aware that people have certain anxieties, certain sort of social preferences, whether that's you're an introvert or an extrovert. And so it is on you to be as active or as inactive socially on that as you want to. Cameras on or off, I don't mind. The point of these sessions is to get your writing done with a group. So danielwillcocks.com/the writers room. The charity anthology that I am editing or will be editing later this year is still open for submissions. So anyone who lends himself to the darker side of fiction, head on over to devilsrockbooks.com/submissions and you will find everything you need to submit your book for my anthology, Hatching Season. And Hatching Season is an infestation anthology. We are looking for stories that are sort of just over 2,000 words, under 5,000 words, of the theme of infestation. So that can be directly, an infestation of fleas or mice or bugs, or it could just be, I personally quite like fringe parts of the theme. And I did sneak a look at one of the stories yesterday that it fit into the fringes of the theme. It kind of like used it quite abstractly, which I really, really enjoyed. But that's not to say that if you've got a direct story of infestation, that's not going to be accepted. It's open to interpretation, and I love to see what people come up with. So if you want to get a story published by me, if you want to be part of what is going to be a cracking anthology that will raise money for Mind, because 100% of all profits are going to go to the charity Mind, then head on over to devilsrockbooks.com/submissions. What else is going on? An update I didn't share and haven't shared for the last couple of weeks. I'm now officially on Reedsy, which I didn't think I would be, but I'm very, very much enjoying it over there. For people unaware, Reedsy is essentially a directory for authors where you can find editors, you can find website designers, you can find cover artists, and it's all review based. You can go on there. It's all handled and protected by Reedsy. So, you're not going to be shut down by some rogue cowboy or cowgirl cover designer who's then going to sort of take you for a ride. It's a very, very well vetted website. And I didn't realize how vetted it was because I applied to be a website designer on there because I've got a history of designing websites for authors and it's something I really, really enjoy. But I applied because I was like, why am I not on here if I want to, try and find people to design websites for and to make some wonderful creations. So I applied. They have like a real strict sort of vetting process. You have to kind of have some credentials behind you. You obviously have to prove your process. You jump on calls and they guide you through. And honestly, like the team there are fantastic. And it has been a really nice experience to have some group sort of intros with them and kind of be led into the process. It's been really, really nice. I just realized my son's Minecraft music is playing, so I will turn that off. And yeah, so if you want to find me over there, if you need a website designer, you can find me over at Reedsy, or again, I offer it all on my website, so feel free to jump over to there. But just kind of a bit of a big up to Reedsy, to be honest. So, and then the final thing I want to say before we jump into the interview is, as I have mentioned last week, I'm going to be ramping up just how frequent, lost the word then, how frequently I'm going to be doing this podcast. I am going to be increasing. I'm going to be increasing to a 1 week schedule. So mark this in your diaries. Every Friday, the Writer's Chair will have a episode coming out. I'm already on my 3-week streak. Go me, my little red X's on my calendar. And as such, I'm going to need to fill some slots with some authors and some people. So if there is anyone you want to hear from that you think I should invite onto the show, then please do message me through danielwillcocks.com. And if you are an author and you think you have something of value to add to the conversation and to share with people who listen to this show, I have a link/application form on the danielwillcocks.com /the Writer's Chair web page, in which you can basically apply to be on the show. So fill in a form. I can't guarantee everyone's going to be on a show. Obviously, I've got a bunch of people booked in already. diaries can get full very, very quickly. But if you are interested in appearing on the show, if you've got something you want to share, want to add, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. It's always nice to hear from people who are listening to the show and kind of give people a platform to share what they're doing. So danielwillcocks.com/the writer's chair. One caveat, I'm updating that webpage today. So I'm hoping it'll be live tomorrow. If it's not, you can also go onto devilsrockbooks.com/podcast, and the same link is there. So devilsrockbooks.com/podcast. And yeah, love to see you on the show. So that's enough of me nattering. I am very, very excited to introduce to you Dan Soule, who is a good author friend of mine. He has been writing some dark fiction for a while, very kind of pulpy, Richard Lehman-y, very Sean Hudson type stuff that like I personally love that kind of thing. And in this interview, we talk a lot about his book, The Jam. He has a book that came out last year called Across the Dunes, which is a kind of British horror fantasy type deal, which is cracking. And I always compare it to the kind of Imagica Weave worlds of Clive Barker. So yeah, Dan Soule is a font of knowledge. As I said in the intro, dyslexia is a PhD. We talk about a lot of fun stuff, but I'm going to stop nattering because, you know, I love to hear the sound of my own voice, but I'm sure you're here for the interview. So, you know, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's pull up a chair, grab a notepad, and let's get into the interview with the one and only Dan Soule. Dan is a horror author who was an academic, but the sentences proved too long and the words too obscure. Northern Ireland is where he now lives, but he was born in England and raised in Byron's hometown, which the bard hated, but Dan does not. They named every other road after Byron. As yet, no roads are named after Dan, but several children are. Dan's literary fiction has featured in Number 11, Storgy, and the Dime Show Review. His science fiction is available in Shoreline of Infinity and Fantaxis, and his horror can be found in Devolution Z, the Sanitarium Magazine, Disturbed Digest, and Into the Ruins. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Oh, those blurbs never get easier to read.
I know, sorry. I read it, I was like, oh, I need to update that as well. But anyway.
I think it gets the gist. Basically, you're an amazing horror author. You're doing some wonderful things, and that's the reason that I've invited you onto the show. Well, actually, I will be totally honest here. Part of the reason that I've invited you onto the show is because we've interacted on and off throughout the years. I can't remember when I first came across you, but in social media, we've chatted, we've done bits and pieces, and it was about time that we came on and had a bit of a chat. And you've got a whole catalogue of horror that I have now started diving into, and I'm super impressed. And I just wanted to share some of what you do with the readers. So there you go, a nice little compliment bucket just to throw over your head to begin with.
Well, that's very nice of you. And obviously, because we're both English, we just take compliments. And so.
Oh, yeah. We just blush a little bit and go.
Like to squirm in the seat and go, yeah, cheers, thanks.
Yeah. But to dive into the questions, so on the front of your website, there is a quote that says, if dreams can come true, so can nightmares. So my question is, why are you so glass half empty?
Yeah. I don't know. It's just for marketing, isn't it? Really? I think what I try and do in the stories anyway is I do like a bit of a hero's or heroine's journey. So I always do like a bit of character growth. So I would say like there's always a lot of tragedy, but there's in the stories themselves there's hopefully more positive growth. People learn stuff. People get comeuppances. I would hope anyway.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful website as well. Massive crow on the front side. I recommend people check it out. Just to start the show, what is your website?
It's dansoule.com, I believe. I seem to remember. Wonderful Megan Smithley, an old friend from university, actually. She's in America, and she got back in touch a few years ago and was like, oh, long time no see, and your website's rubbish. Oh yeah. She read one of my books. She read Neolithica and was like, "Oh, this is brilliant. It made me cry." Blah blah blah. And we kind of started to talk again. And she was a really talented website designer and stuff like that. So she did it for me. Although she's currently not doing it anymore. So I'm in the process of slowly ruining it through entropy and attrition.
That's the way it goes, though. We're writers. We're not website designers. But tell us a little bit about Dan Soule. Tell us about how you got into writing and where your kind of journey into horror came from.
Yeah. So I'm not one of those ones that goes, "Oh, well, I was writing in the womb." You hear from a lot of authors. Good for you if you were that. I'm very pleased for you. No, I was, I suppose, came to actually writing horror pretty late. In my, what am I, 45 now? I don't know. I started tinkering in my kind of mid-30s. So going way back, I suppose I was not a natural writer because I was really profoundly dyslexic as a child. So I was probably like functionally illiterate till I was about 11 or 12. but ironically then kind of struggled on and ended up with a degree and then a PhD in English and linguistics. But the writing never came particularly easy. And so I kind of was always a bit of an autodidact, because how other people were learning to do stuff didn't work for me. So I just started to kind of teach myself how to do those things. And then I ended up kind of teaching writing as a university lecturer or professor for those in America.
Mm.
And then after a few years of that, about 5, 6, 7 years, 7 years as an academic, I quit and I run my own business as a like teaching writing at universities. And that freed up time to do something else, because I didn't work in a university anymore, which, if anyone has worked in a university, you spend half of your time in meetings or meetings about meetings. Generally, like any big organization, where the majority of my time is not spent doing what my job is. So all of a sudden, I kind of had lots of free time, and I thought, you know, I've tried to start writing a novel a couple of times in my life, and you kind of write a chapter or two and then don't know how to do it. So I then kind of set about thinking, how the hell do I actually learn to write fiction? I've written research papers, I've written a monograph about Scottish politics and national identity, I've written a thesis, a 75,000 word thesis. So I know how to write big books. And then I just applied it to fiction. And the horror thing was, I kind of didn't really have I thought I was quite eclectic in my taste. So I started writing short stories and just experimenting, just write the stories that kind of come to you. And then as I started to try to sell them, it was horror magazines that were buying them mostly. A little bit in science fiction, a bit in literary fiction, but it came as actually a surprise. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, these are kind of like horror stories, aren't they? I don't know what, sort of supernatural thrillery type thing. I don't know. I love Neil Gaiman. I don't know. I think I was writing maybe I imagined I was writing darker and kind of crapper Neil Gaiman stories or something. And they started to find a market, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's like a feedback loop. If someone gives you some money, you write a story, you write another one, they give you some more money. Not a lot of money, obviously. And then, so I thought, oh no, actually, I do enjoy writing these. So I always think horror kind of found me rather than I found horror. There's no like deliberate thing. It was more of a kind of be open to possibilities. And like, I'm writing a crime novel at the moment, and it has some kind of darker, supernaturally frisons type things, but more in the area of unreliable narrators, because that's what people love, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there you go. That's it.
Horror found you. Interesting. Because I have a lot of, I guess, developing theories on horror as I work my way through the genre and kind of look into stuff. And I've said this on this show before, but the thing that makes me laugh most about horror is you'll say to people, I write horror, and they're like, oh, I'd never read or watch horror. And it's like, oh, what did you watch last night? Oh, I watched Ted Bundy documentary on Netflix. And I'm like, that is horror. And obviously you mentioned there Neil Gaiman, and he has a lot of sort of whimsical stuff, but they're very dark undertones. Like, some of his books have really, really dark themes. And it's interesting to kind of like see the bubble that is horror transcend into other genres. And for me, and this might be a bit too sort of above the brow, but like, I feel like horror is it's just that transcendence of genre. Like, it just melts into everything else, and we try and categorize it, but fear just leaks into everything. And I think, that's what makes books compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with that. I always think of it as a bit of a master genre, really. If you think about really old texts like Gilgamesh or the Bible or whatever, like most religious texts, the Bhagavad Gita, pretty scary.
Yeah.
It's full of supernatural elements and monsters. And so I kind of think of it as the master genre, the original genre, because it contains a lot of humor. It can contain romance and thrillers and action. So really kind of a literary end as well. And I think a lot of modern published horror, certainly by the traditional publishers, tend to be more of the literary end.
Yes.
Of horror and stuff. But yeah, no, I have that same reaction. You go, oh, what do you read? What do you write? And you go, oh, horror. And they go, oh, that's a shame. I don't read horror. So if you say I write supernatural thrillers, they're like, oh, okay, maybe. But
yeah,
a bit that puts a lot of people off. I think, like from a marketing point of view, probably saying something is a supernatural thriller. I remember Paul Tremblay was always, I've heard him say a couple of times, like he's disappointed that the publishers market them as thrillers.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you want to sell books.
Yeah. That tends to be where the money kind of comes from.
It is. And I mean, I grew up I was born in the late 70s and grew up in the 80s and 90s. Those were kind of boom times up to kind of mid 90s, wasn't it, for horror, where you would have Robert McGowan having a billboard, Stephen King would be in all the big publications and stuff like in the Guardian and the Times literary supplement and stuff like that when they have a new book come out, and it's a big event. But obviously about 95, like traditional publishing went, "Nah, I've had enough for that," and cut it all out. So
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I mean they still do have some small presses, but they tend to be like the smaller in presses.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll definitely I've got some questions on sort of like your views on indie and trad and all that kind of stuff. Before we get into that, you obviously mentioned Neil Gaiman there as an influence generally in kind of your eclectic tastes. Who are some of the horror authors that have kind of inspired your works that, you know, keep your fire burning? And who do you recommend to people when they say, "Oh, I would like to read a bit more horror"?
I mean, I'm not going with the obvious one. I'll say him last. So I'm a real fan of Dean Koontz. So I think that he deserves a lot more props than he gets, and he's still banging out good books, several a year. But he's slightly, I suppose, he's a slightly more conservative gentleman, and it does come through. Well, he's a kind of humanist, yeah, centrist humanist kind of thing. It comes out in his writing. But yeah, but he's got great books like Phantoms from the 90s and Lightning, and I mean, he doesn't just write horror, he writes, you know, some science fiction type stuff. But I love a Dean Koontz book. I think we were talking before going on air, but that kind of idea of high end pulp, you know, so a good plot, ripping story, interesting idea, some characters you can get a little bit of meat into, but not necessarily too much. Some antagonists with a bit of dimension to them as well, but also some ones you can just love to hate. And yeah, and he likes his science as well, so he usually takes a kind of popular science idea and stuff, and kind of riffs on that a little bit. So really recommend Dean Koontz. British author, not a lot of people know, Stephen Laws from the 80s.
Okay.
So kind of from the, what were they called? The New Library, or the New British Library, used to publish people like Herbert, and he was contemporary of like Ramsey Campbell. I need to say Gordon Ramsay there. Ramsey Campbell and James Herbert and Phil Rickman, guys like that. So,
Okay.
and that kind of British cohort, and he's written some fantastic books. Valancourt have reprinted a few of them, but he kind of disappeared in the late noughties, like 2007, I think was his last book. And I interviewed him for my blog on my website, so you can go and read that. But he has a son that was profoundly autistic, and so he stepped away from writing to help his son, basically. So I was chatting to him, and he says he's got a couple of novels in the drawer that he hasn't had published. Oh, gosh, someone needs to publish that, man. So
Find them.
great. Yeah, again, that kind of high-end pulp commercial fiction for horror. But I'd really recommend Ghost Train, Gideon, which is a really kind of cool riff on the vampire mythos. Worm, so many good ones. Yeah. Stephen Laws, he was a big influence. James Herbert, absolutely. I've got loads of James Herbert books over there. Who else? Really like M.R. Carey.
Yes, Go with All the Gifts.
Yeah, Go with Boy on the Bridge, Book of Coley. The kind of Ronald Malfi. Love a bit of Ronald Malfi. Maybe my favorite horror book of all time is Dan Simmons' The Terror.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I also like the kind of, if people are detecting a change in sound on the podcast, like, and this happens with everyone I interview, it's the turnaround to look at the book. No, you can, like, I can still hear you perfectly fine, but it's just, you can tell.
Grow my voice. Sorry.
No, I love it. I think it just adds to like just the nature of it. Yeah, some fantastic choices in there. So obviously you've, you know, read a fair chunk of horror. I know one of the things that I've seen you speak about briefly on social media and kind of championing a lot is independent horror, which has had a big boom in the last sort of 10, 15 years, thanks to obviously KDP and the advent and the kind of rise of self-publishing. What are your kind of opinions these days on traditional publishing and independent publishing? And how do people find independently published authors if they love horror?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one. I think, what are my opinions on it? And say, yeah, I mean, I think so I think you need to define terms first, right? So it gets much debate. So the way I use the term independent is to think self-published. but self-published has a bit of a dirty connotation to it. So I tend to prefer like indie, like an indie band. I much prefer that idea. You're not you're kind of independent from labels. But I know a lot of horror nowadays is, so I think there's three categories. I think there's independently published people, then there's small presses, but they'd like to call themselves indies, right? And then there are what would come under the big four plus Amazon presses. So I suppose there's good stuff being published in all three of those categories. I think the same problem and the same good side and the same bad side for all three categories exist, which is there's some fantastic books amongst all three of those categories, undoubtedly. And then there's a lot of crap as well. But and I don't have any statistics on the percentage. I just go on what I like. Like I read a lot of books this year from all three of those categories. And I find it really hard to finish a book this year, but that's just mine. For the years I've found book after book has just been brilliant. So yeah, there's some brilliant gems in indie horror and in small presses and trad horror as well. And then I think there's a lot of hype that you get that doesn't bear out. But some of that's taste as well. Like I have particular tastes, and they're not necessarily towards the literary end of horror, which is where a lot of the kind of attention and accolades goes, which is good because it's, that's just a taste thing. It's just not my bag.
Yeah. I think it's a good gateway as well. Like having kind of, books that have been given awards, rightly or wrongly, depending on, politics and which awards and things they are. I think it's a nice little entryway for people to kind of go like, oh, maybe I'll like these authors. I like these. So then I'll like these. And he goes on a bit of a journey. And I have found some of the best reads that I have read have been through independently published authors that you just would never hear of in any other place. And I'm trying to figure out at the minute ways or places that already have some kind of system to find more of these independently published authors, because there are some fantastic ones around.
I think it's so right. Like it's an issue of curation, right? So I think the trad press and small presses actually have quite good curation, and the podcasts circuit, there's the kind of This Is Horror and Paper Cuts and Talking Scared, and so there's a whole bunch of like, what's the other one? Deadhead Space and all those kind of ones. Big kind of horror podcasts, and they kind of cover that really, really well. But I always think we have a problem with curation with indie horror because there's so much out there. And then an exciting thing about it as well is there's people mixing as well. Like my last book was for a small press. It was for Crystal Lake Publishing. It came out with their anthologies. So, it's not that you're one or the other necessarily. Like J.D. Barker would be a big trad thriller writer, but publishes indie horror books. And technically Brian Keane now and Adam Neville are completely indie. I bought everything in-house. And, they're big names and they're able to do really cool stuff. But actually, as you know all about this, like with Book Vault and everything now, indies are starting to be able to do like really high production costs and sprayed edges and special editions. And so that's really exciting. But I think we'll just see a lot more of that. Like I'm predominantly indie published, but have small press books, and I'm going for a trad deal. I think some of it depends on the book and whether you feel it's got like a commercial appeal and it fits into what a big publishing house might be looking at. Like this book I'm kind of shopping around at the moment is far more of a kind of, which will like real world fantasy, more of a like kind of, The Night Circus or Neil Gaiman, Graham Joyce type book. With elements of horror. So the stress is not on the horror, it's on the fantasy, on the Discworld fantasy. Therefore, it might have more commercial appeal. And if it doesn't, I'll just indie publish it.
Yeah. It's the fun of the options that we have. I think that's the beauty of where we're at the minute is you can kind of start at the top and then work your way down depending on whatever your goal is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just one, it's either a good book or it's not a good book. I can spend $25 on a brand new hardback and then not finish it and go, okay, that was rubbish, And
I don't have it in me to like not finish a book unless it's like truly, it has to be in the first few chapters. But I'm one of those, I'm like, I'll continue to read it because even though I don't like it, I want to work out why I don't like it.
Yeah, I've read a few books, but I end up being angry at the end. And they're like, and sometimes it's a book that everyone's praising online, and you go,
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
I really hate this, or like, and I do, sometimes it's good to finish a book you don't like from a writer's point of view. Like you want to critique it to say, why don't I like this, or what was it about it? Was it the writing style, or was it me? and those kind of things. But like like you said, the positive thing is that you can find good stuff everywhere. And I think for a writer, you've got lots and lots of choices. The stats are stacked against you anyway, you know.
Why not try?
So why not try? Yeah, yeah, you know. And some people make it brilliantly as an indie. My mate Lee Malford is absolutely killing it as a horror indie author. Do you know Lee?
Yeah, I think I've chatted with Lee at one point, but a while ago.
Yeah, he's a brilliant fella. Just one of life's great gentlemen. But he's doing brilliantly. He's full time and as an indie author, and
Amazing.
wife is as well. But she writes, I think she writes fantasy romance. So with joke, she's clearly going to outsell him by really, really soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what to you makes a good horror book? I know you mentioned there about, the sort of high-end pulp stuff you enjoy writing. You mentioned kind of a few different directions, but what are the components of a horror book that appeal to you?
Okay, so I want a kind of synthesis between like plot and character where both serve each other. Okay, so like I want something to actually happen. You know, I don't want someone mooching around and a set of chest of drawers seeming to be floating in a room or something. That's a reference.
It's specific.
Specific. You know, so I think, you know, I want the plot to be serving the character, and like I like that there's some character development or change through the book. Because it's not essential, like, you know, some of the best ones are like King. Like King often writes characters that don't learn anything about themselves in the whole book. But you still get loads of plot and character in there. There are different ways of cutting it. What else would I like of it? Yeah, I always describe it as like commercial prose. So I like prose that's like fairly easy to read, but also isn't afraid of a nice metaphor or simile and a bit of a rhythmic construction, but doesn't feel the need to go full bore literary on it. So it's a kind of balance of those things: plot, character, readable style. That's what I want. Cool idea.
Yeah. And we'll segue using that to jump into The Jam, which I recently read of yours, which kind of fits that description to a T, at least from a reader's perspective. It's got that very kind of clean prose that has some really nice kind of twist of phrase. And one of the things that I noticed in there that I really kind of appreciated that you did, whether this was, conscious or unconscious, is almost theming each character and tying the theme into the way that you create the metaphors. So you've got a character, and none of this should be a spoiler. You've got a character called Austin King in there. And there are a lot of metaphors for the situation that occurred in The Jam, which obviously then held back to his football career. And I thought some of the ways that you played with that were just really nice. And each character seemed to have their own kind of flavor and music as they went through. And I'm a big fan myself of kind of the head hopping and like seeing each different character, even though I know some people that's like the worst thing that can happen. But I really like seeing different perspectives. Was that something that you thought out from the start? Is that kind of something that you intentionally tried to get in there, or is that just part of what came?
Yeah, I like. What was the book I read about this? It has this. A few years ago, I read quite a few years ago a book about writing. What's it called? Adrian J. Walker recommended it, and I can't remember what it was without turning around, and I don't want to look at my bookshelf.
You can turn around. I want to make you conscious.
Find it. I can't find it. But anyway, the concept was called armature. And I really like this because sometimes I think of it as resonance, okay, or like playing a chord, right? So you can have different notes, but if you arrange the notes in a certain pattern, you get a nice chord, you get a nice harmonic going on, right? I'll butcher this metaphor, but it's that kind of similar idea. So that I want, you think of like you phrase it in a way, I'm picking up on your music idea. That there's a certain music to a character. A bit like if you watch a Sergio Leone movie, like Once Upon a Time in America, Once Upon a Time in the West, where there's basically 4 points of view, and each character has a different soundtrack. So when they're on screen and they're the predominant point of view, you hear their sound, you hear their piece of melodic music or whatever. It's that kind of idea, yeah. So you kind of have like an extended metaphor, I suppose, or set of similes, or even like the cadence of their language. I suppose you're thinking of all the different kinds of aspects that are going to pick up. There's like, I think the other one is Donovan, isn't it? Who's the internet guru guy.
Yeah.
And again, you will have shorter clipped sentences because he's more of a, hey man, I'm trying to sell you something, and that kind of thing. And yeah, absolutely. So armature. So everything kind of, and then you want to try and, if possible in the story, like have antonyms. So if you've got the light character, you've got the dark character.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of balances. Yeah, absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
do about that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's like it's there at the start, and sometimes you're on the lookout for it. At least I am through the process, and then some of it is at the end, looking for it and then tweaking it or like amping certain elements up so that it works really, really, really well. You know, trying to find it. Yeah.
Yeah. My buddy Luke Condor, I think he says sort of along 3 drafts. The first draft is just telling the story to yourself. Second draft is kind of the structural, making the story work, and then the third is just adding the poetry. And I think it's those kind of like flavors and things that I like to add, and I definitely saw in that story. Is it a bit of a stupid question to say where did the idea for this story come from?
No, not at all. But I remember exactly where. I like questions like that. I know Neil Gaiman has. I'm a big Neil Gaiman fanboy.
Yeah.
He's got like, where do they come from? You know, it's just like, well, I don't know. You know, in your head.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of flippant answer, but it is true. No, I remember when I first had the idea for it, we were living in Scotland, and we were driving home towards a town called Coatbridge at the time. And I was a little bit tipsy, and my wife wasn't. She was driving, and I remember driving, and it was an empty motorway, driving back from Glasgow to Coatbridge, and I just remember going, "God, a traffic jam would be a perfect place to set a horror story, wouldn't it?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, just because you're kind of you're not in a specific place. You're kind of, you're nowhere.
Yeah,
which is how it starts the story, isn't it? Some specific nowhere.
Yeah. Really nice intro.
Yeah, thank you. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of an interesting idea. Like, so yeah, you're in a kind of liminal spaces. And so, yeah, I thought that's kind of an interesting place. You'll know that you're going between 2 places, and very easy to get trapped as well. And then you don't really know where you are, especially if you'd lost your sat nav and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You cue plot contrivance to get rid of all sat nav and electronic. And then you're like, yeah, you don't really know where you are. And I remember like, I went to Japan when I was 21 to do some martial arts and travel around with some friends. And it's a funny thing how they name, like in Japan, they don't really name roads. So we name roads. They name the blocks in between the roads.
Okay.
Right. So it's the same idea, like different way of doing it. And I just like kind of interesting way where like we name the roads, but they name the blocks in between them. So you're not really on the road, you're on the block, right? And also remember the houses from start to finish. So there's a top of the road and a bottom of the road. It's ordered from newest to oldest house.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, the numbers don't go sequentially. So I was in Japan before sat navs and stuff, and so you would get in a cab, and the taxi driver would drive around the corner to the payphone and then phone where you're going, and then ask how to get there.
Whoa, that's gotta be hard for the postman as well.
Yeah,
just zigzagging,
crazy hard, like because no one knew where anything was, especially like, 20 million people in Tokyo or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just kind of that idea of spaces and between spaces is a common one in horror. So that was initially the kind of the idea, and then I suppose like you layer several things. Like one thing that's not a horror story, right? It's a jam. So you got to think what traps them, and what the motivations in the story. And I just thought it would be quite interesting the idea of like, okay, there's not one serial killer, but what if there is a lineage of serial killers that pass on the craft from one generation to the next? And how do you indoctrinate someone to be a serial killer if that's not their, kind of natural state? So that's kind of like one of the things to look out for in the story. It's like a sort of a family of serial killers. And then the other thing that I thought was quite good, I quite like ensemble horrors, like something like John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
You post on the wall. I love those kind of things where or The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist. I really love that kind of book, and I wanted to write a sort of similar length book to The Mist because it's one of my favorite books, even though it's a novella. What a perfect contrivance to bring a whole load of people that normally wouldn't be together into one space. So you've got like a family, you could have, and when I first started the story, I had a bus of school children, which you only see part of.
Yes.
When Donovan goes on the bus.
Yeah.
And there were bits like, there were loads more scenes, but to strum it down and make it less chaotic, I kind of used didn't see all of them to try and make it work. But yeah, how do you get like a failed internet cryptocurrency guru, you know, a Premiership England footballer, a retired GP, a crazy kind of like abusive father and his family and those kind of things? How do you get them? And then a kind of seeming working girl.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you get them all in one place together and then trap them?
Yeah.
And then once I thought, oh, okay, cool. And then it's one of those stories that you can't really give away much about why they're trapped, because that's kind of.
Yeah, I've got questions, but I don't know that I can ask them without giving spoilers. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say it is the first one of yours that I've read, and it definitely won't be the last, because it does have that kind of, as you know, we've said multiple times here, that kind of 80s high pulp resonance that I really, like, just grips me in horror. I don't know if you've read any of his, but one that I found recently that I had the same thing with was Ben Farthing's It Comes from the Top Floor.
No, I've heard about it though.
Yeah, very, very good. It's kind of cosmic, but the first chapter is basically a skyscraper just appears overnight, and so the whole story is about, you know,
Great hook.
yeah, literally just like the first page, just like bam, and you're like, okay, now I want to know what's up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very similar. It's got that kind of like clean prose and things. But we are beginning to run short on time, so I have a couple more questions. The first one is, if you could recommend one book to our audience, what book would that be? And I know that's difficult, and I did the same with Michael David Wilson. I'll do the same with you. I'll give you two books. One of them is yours, one of your favorite ones to recommend to the audience, and then the other one is just your favorite horror book that you'd like to recommend. It doesn't even have to be horror, to be fair.
Evil. All right. Okay. I'll recommend my novel Witch Hopper, which is, it's quite a long book. Don't let that put you off. It's like 150,000 words, but it's a good chunky kind of like kids on bike, small town horror.
Yeah. Sold.
set in the kind of, it's set in my hometown actually of Southwell, and it kind of riffs on the local mythos. So the Green Man, Jack in the Green sometimes is called, the local. We have a cathedral in the town, and it's got some of the most famous carvings of the Green Man, which is this kind of pagan entity that we don't really know very much about. But obviously it mixes into the ideas of Nottinghamshire being the wild wood and Sherwood and that kind of thing. And then a lot of the kind of ideas of grey ladies and white ladies, which you get a lot around England.
Okay.
Especially in the Midlands and the North. Most of the little villages or towns have like a grey lady or a white lady, maybe not down south.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of them, and they're usually these quite forlorn, wistful figures, like they were run over by a coach, or they killed themselves after their husbands ran out of them on the 1750s, that kind of thing. So I just thought, like, well, what if one of these was a vengeful spirit in the end? And then the idea was, what could make a really lovely girl from this early 1800s turn into their vengeful spirit? And the whole idea is, she's called the Witch Hopper because her name was Mary Hooper, and over time she became the Witch Hopper because she was seen as a local witch. And if you see her, she haunts a local pub. If you see her, then you have a very short amount of time to live, right? And that came from the idea. I remember as a kid, Saturday morning TV, they used to do these like creepy story things, and there was the devil dogs, and if you saw the devil dogs, not long after you would die, right? So it was that kind of smashing all this stuff together, and there's a lot of just like, local folklore and mythology, and it's about a father is a fallen. The main protagonist is like a father and son. They've had to come back to Southwell as a family because he was the political editor of the Telegraph, but had an affair, and so they're trying to rebuild their marriage, and they've ripped their teenage son out of London, and he's kind of having to start a new school. And to try and bond, he takes him along to do a local interest piece on this haunted pub. And of course, then that's the inciting incident. They see the Witch Hopper, and then initially think it's just hallucination. It's not a thing. It didn't really happen. But then slowly these two start to experience the effects of the Witch Hopper. And then it's like intercut with her story about what happened, and then there's all this other stuff going on around it. So yeah, it's a kind of big, I feel like there's kind of big weedy Stephen King-y type novels. It's a bit like that.
Perfect.
So yeah, go Witch Hopper. Book for other people. Okay. I'm going to recommend this because I'm going to sneakily do two.
Go for it.
Soule by Scott Carson. Michael Carita is a big thriller writer, but he has an alternative ego called Scott Carson, and he writes the most fantastic horror novels. He lets his horror self go. So this one came out at the start of the pandemic. It's called The Chill, and it's set sort of, I think it's like King. It's like set somewhere like Maine, and there's a big dam, like that's the subsidiary to the Hoover Dam. And there's a sunken village underneath, and the ghosts of the sunken village have been waiting nearly 100 years for the mechanics to be right, to destroy the people that they destroyed their town, right? And it's just a fantastic like character piece and just page-turning brilliant. So Scott Carson, The Chill, love Scott Carson. He's written some other great books too. And then I'm going to recommend my friend Cecil Murphy, All of Me, which is a novella, okay? And this is the only time I've ever read a book and finished it and thought, I wish I was someone of influence and importance, right? So that I could get to read, like I could recommend this book to loads of people. I wish I was wish I was the showrunner on Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
Right? So that I could get them, because this is a book about obesity. Okay. And it's one of the biggest topics. No one really writes books about this. It's about a lady that's overweight, and a next door neighbor gives her this funky root to eat, and she divides in three after eating it, and in each side of her is a different part of her personality that cares for her, but in a negative way. So there's the aggressive side,
Wow.
There's the critical side, right? And they're all three, okay, and they're all skinny versions of herself, right? It's darkly funny, right, and just yearningly sweet and caring about the person. Like it's absolute tour de force. It's wonderfully readable. It's a really quick read. So much packed into probably like 30,000, 35,000 words. All of Me, Cecil Murphy. He's an absolute brilliant writer. Right.
There you go. Perfection. I will make sure links for those are in the show notes. People can click on those and grab their copy. I'll be grabbing All of Me after this conversation, I think. And also, just a note on the Scott Carson. So you say that's the kind of pen name, that's the alter ego of what was the
Michael Carita.
Michael Carita. What is it about authors that have multiple pen names that seem to be incredible writers? I'm a huge fan of Nick Cutter, who is obviously Craig Davidson and his alter ego, well, his actual ego, and Nick Cutter's his alter ego. But there seems to, I don't know if there's something there. I'm just picking up on these people that step into horror and just
books. Authors that makes me feel nauseous when I read it.
So good, so good.
I've got visual descriptions. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I'll tell you off air something, but yeah, like amazing, absolutely amazing guy. Final question then. Where is it that people can go? We've already mentioned, but you might have some other places as well. Where can people go to find out more about yourself and everything that you're working on?
It would be dansoule.com would be the website, which has lots of other information and stuff. And then I am at writer Dan Soule on the various socials. I'm not on the TikTok.
Me neither, really.
I'm on the gram, and I went away from Twitter, but I went back because I don't know. I wasn't sure if it affected my book sales. I don't think it did, and now I'm back in the swamp.
Yeah.
And I am on Facebook there, but not very much as an author. So, but if you're on Twitter or Instagram and you like to chat or whatever and ask questions and things like that, it's always nice to talk to people.
Yeah, and I can attest Dan does get back to you. So, and that goes for both of us. I hit us with both for the Dans. And that is a wrap. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming on the show. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here. If today's conversation has sparked something inside you, go and do something with it. That's the whole point of this show. And if you fancy going deeper on anything we've touched on today, whether that's your writing, your process, or actually finishing your book, head on over to danielwillcocks.com/writers. I've got a growing host of resources, tools, and programs designed to help writers get their books out of their minds and into the world. And I would love to see you over there. So until next time, my friends, write bravely and dream big.